A very quick vid on a fun subject. Computers I've known and really have happy feelings when I think about. Hewlett Packard HP 41CX half nut and full nut both calculators loaded with RAM boxes and bank switching circuits and all sorts of crazy things that are really worthless now, but it taught me to understand and appreciate how much you could do extreme programming. Fast forward now, you can buy an HP 41CX, uh, well, reverse engineered version that works just fine. There's a software version you can put on your computer. And that is because that the NOMAS, not manufacturer supported microcode or assembly language or binary code for the ROMs and specifications for the processor were released so people could make emulators when computers got fast enough. The original code that these were written on was assembled on the HP 85, sort of a personal computer. And it emulated the hardware. So it was emulated to write the software for it. And it had all sorts of deliciously interesting bugs. And the half nut or full nut version, forgot which one, could do things that were really, really cool, like individually controlling the pixels on the screen, which today seems simple. But this is a calculator with a liquid crystal display that's supposed to display numbers and characters like alphabet characters. Nothing else. And the thing I dreamed of, because of the space directly above it, when you put in a card reader or a RAM box or any other big plug-in device that would consume its own, way too much power sometimes, was to put a very small LCD screen on it that could be enabled and disabled by flipping a switch. We would turbo the thing by literally just disconnecting a capacitor, and it would go as fast as possible. We would put heat sinks on a calculator. I ran mine at high enough rate of function that we had to use special purpose capacitors and parts to replace in the circuit board to get it to work. I don't even remember what the speed was. It was upwards of 100 megahertz. It's only supposed to run at a bias frequency of 5 megahertz and effective speed about 3,000 cycles a second. This was a handheld computer that was in the form of a calculator that could do some amazing things. But you had to get into the nitty-gritty. And every time you made a mistake, it was your fault. That's why you use a RAM box. Don't burn a ROM and hope it works. You had to use a memory module emulating it. The Machine Language Development Lab, MLDL, the RAM box. The Aramco RAM box. Zengrange. Some of you will remember these things. Very few of you. In fact, I doubt any of you are going to see this. And I also learned on the Commodore 64 and 128. And I learned on the Timex Sinclair. I always had dreams of expanding them to something cool like using a modem or a real TV screen, or better yet, printer. I experimented with the Hewlett Packard interface loop, learning how to manually code things to work on a current loop-based cable that would break all the time. I spent upwards of, I think, at the end of the day, on it and the HP71 and the HP75 and all the weird modules that always had that wonderful smell of just being right from the factory and being made out of a mixture of artificial parts and stupid things like plastics that are made based on wood grain material, and some of the parts were made out of natural rubber. There was gold plating on the circuit boards. They were literally a work of art. Even had a magical analog moment with these circuits because they could do that. They shouldn't. Gained a personality. Not very useful, but kind of made you wonder. I have an interesting story. Maybe I'll link to it. Maybe I'll just cut and paste it in the description. But anyway, someone asked me today, how would I get a Commodore 64? What is it worth these days? I want one, but I don't want to get ripped off. They go for about $100 if it's tested and ready to go. But if you want to spend double or almost triple that amount, or just maybe double, you can buy parts that people have built by building entire circuit boards that went from this big for the Commodore 64 to a little strip about that wide and that long. About the size of a ruler with a little extra over here. A credit card next to a ruler. People have reverse engineered it to the point that they're almost done completely replacing it. And obviously you can use faster processors and make it do all sorts of tricks. Just like the HP calculators now, you can buy them where they use a chip that's so fast it can emulate the original processor at 80 times the speed. Unlimited memory. You can put as much memory chips in it as you want to. I remember building a RAM box by buying 2K byte individual chips, 2,000 bytes, one page of data. Literally, they were called page RAM. Static memory chips. And I couldn't build a circuit board big enough, so I soldered them on top of each other and hooked up the address lines in a big column like that and wired them up to a selector so I could make a 64K memory box. I got paid at one time to fix Commodore 64s and the others because I knew how to do microfine wiring made from copper-coated steel leads run through the circuit boards to repair them because they were so satanically expensive to repair. I retraced an entire HP 41 calculator this big. So I understand what these people went through, but you can get a piece of software for designing a circuit board. Just throw the parts on that you find on the list, tell the program to route as much of the wiring as possible, and take every other surface area and make one side of the board positive and the other side negative, or make it 3 layers, and send it off to some factory and they'll make you 1,000 of them for about $100. That's how cheap they get. For the Commodore 64, you have to get good quality clicky keys. The Cherry Key Company, I think, is the one that people quote most. And you have to have the circuit board built, and you put the clicky keys on it, and you put a metal plate underneath it to make it really rigid and steely. Put that circuit board that other guy made and put it under there, wire everything up. It uses modern electronics. You have USB sockets and all the other things. They've completely done away with the parts that nobody really used, like that other socket on the Commodore 64 that isn't really used. I remember learning how to manually draw barcode because some of these things would let you barcode a program in. I remember making printing programs myself. I've written my own fonts. I wouldn't trade all of that time-wasting and energy-wasting crap that cost me about $1,000 for the entire pile over the entire time I did it for anything. The amount of practical learning I got out of it was probably the reason I'm stubborn as hell in solving problems. A damaged or unworking or untested Commodore 64, $35. So you get 2 of them for parts. If you're lucky, everything will work. You're going to have to learn how to check for bad parts, resolder circuit boards, learn how to heat up a connection without damaging the parts, replace everything with sockets. You're going to have to learn how to tear a board down perfectly, put the parts to the side, clean that board perfectly, and then say to hell with it and make a copy of it. You can draw a circuit board on a piece of blank copper and make your own circuit board. That's how hardcore this can get. Or just spend $200 or even less and just have somebody build you one. Amigas are another computer like that where they have an almost mythical status. And the Amiga reverse engineering process is extreme too. People are still talking about using the original ROMs because they don't want to break any copyrights when the ROM images have been available for a long time and are legal, but they'll make it work perfectly. You can go to GitHub. You can go on a website of C64GS Blogspot. There's a Reddit. There's always a Reddit. There's a GitHub, obviously, again. Get a new board or an old board. VintageComputers.ca will show you what the old boards look like, the new ones, on Hackster or other places. Used parts stores and hobbyists will have the real deal. After that, it's going to yard sales and hoping you find someone who's died and left all of it to people who don't know what they're seeing. Lastly, it's Craigslist and eBay. Ultimate64.com/ultimate-64 shows you that really nice motherboard. You can go to Amiga Love, and they have room for the Commodores, any of them. Lots and lots of cool stuff. Lots of places make the plastic case parts. You just have to assemble them. They're based on just imaging the old ones. Why do a video on this? Because this is pleasant. It's fun. I learned a lot back then. The HP 41 went on the shuttle launches. Commodore 64 was used for a lot of amateur launches. A lot of us learned on these microcomputers, as we used to call them, and now I would definitely call them that. Handheld computers. I taught mine to play music. I wrote my own music routines. You can even get modulation and voice out of it. We learned all sorts of mystical things, like the fact that a piece of circuit board could act as a receiver for sound or electromagnetic fields if you had a sampling rate high enough and wrote a program that way. I learned to deal with a computer that ran on 57-bit memory address and data bus, all running through 4 wires, because it was serial access, which means it technically had no limit on the addressing. You could address an infinite amount of memory. You just had to have the hardware and the time. Infinite possibilities, literally, in a little chip about that big. A long time ago. Now we deal with YouTube not being able to render our comments correctly, and finding ways to invent new and more exciting ways to do stupid shit that was solved decades ago. Anyway, I'll cut and paste all the resources I gave to the, what was her name? Lulu. Thank you for asking. I'm not going to include the HP41 stuff. That's way obscure. Thanks for the trip down memory lane, mostly because I tripped down it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.